Hello class. This week we're going to be discussing all things leadership. So when we talk about leadership, there's certain words that come to mind like power and influence and different traits and leadership styles and different situations in which leaders find themselves. These are all the things that we're going to be talking about for this week's content, this week's lecture. So within your readings, there's a model of leadership, which I think really does a good job of covering everything that we're going to be covering in this unit. So we're going to start kind of, if you're looking at this, we're going to start from the left-hand side, and we're going to work our way over because certainly leadership has been around for many, many, many years, but it really hasn't been studied in an academic sense. Maybe since the mid 1900s sometimes. So in terms of being studied, it's relatively new. So there's a lot that we're learning about leadership. There's a lot that we have covered that nowadays we're saying, well, that's a little dated and not necessarily relevant today. But it's good to kind of understand the perspective and where we came from and where we're going. Kind of like we've done with management this entire term. So we're going to first start looking at things like leadership traits, which were some of the earliest things studied when we looked at leaders. What are some of the traits? What are some of the skills? What about the different genders of leaders? Does that matter in terms of leadership effectiveness? After that, we're going to start bringing in some leadership behaviors where we talk about tasks versus relationships or consideration. And then also within this, we introduce things like forms of power and means or ways to influence individuals, along with different situational factors. We've seen many, many times that leaders succeed in one situation, but then don't do as well in another situation. So what are those situational factors that could lead to leadership effectiveness, and how could leaders change their styles or their behaviors to better fit the situations that they find themselves in? And all of this, of course, leads to leadership effectiveness. So we're kind of looking at it going left to right, understanding these different perspectives of leadership and how all of those have contributed to leadership effectiveness over the years. So the lecture will be broken off into a number of modules like we talked about. The first one will just be definitional and some of the earlier trait-related aspects of leadership. Module 2, we're going to start getting into some of these task-oriented or style-oriented, behavior-oriented leadership. And then we're going to move on to more situational factors. And within the different modules, we're also going to talk about things like power and influence, and even the dark side of leadership, which is a very important topic, especially nowadays when you see some of the malfeasance going on in some of the organizations, especially at the leadership level. So it's important to talk not only about leadership in its most idealized state, but also the dark side of leadership and how that could lead to different types of stresses and burnouts and organizational failure. So we're going to cover all of that in this week's lecture as we talk about all things leadership.